Now, the other thing too is, what if you want to have two fields side by side? What if you want all fields side by side? Okay, so instead of just being vertically going down, name, address, city, state, zips, phone, this is where you might go and look at positioning and using positioning controls. Okay, so one of the things is that you take a look at the parent container, which is the form element. In the form element up here, we can basically go in and use the display method, and we can tell it to be flex. So what that means is any elements inside the form, it's basically going to put it kind of side by side, so it makes it look like that you are floating it side by side. And we used to do a lot of times with floats. You can still do it with floats, but I like using display float, or I'm sorry, display flex, and sometimes display grid. And you can see that it puts it side by side. Now, you might not want it all 5 fields that way. Okay, so the key here is, as you resize the window, notice that the fields don't wrap. And again, I'm not going to be here to talk about more about display method or and how to use flex. But one of the things that I like to do is, if I was going to wrap something around with the content, I would use the flex -wrap option. And just like this. And then what this looks like, let me just open it back up and refresh. Then it wraps around. Now it doesn't, depending on how your window is, if your screen size is this size, it gets a little harder to control. Okay, so you still have to kind of adjust it accordingly. So using display flex, it might be a possible way of getting things lined up. But typically, as I mentioned before, we're probably not going to line up all 5 lines going across. So what can we do? Let's say I want to go in and I want city, state, and zip on the same line. Okay? Now, in this regards, then I might want to make some changes to my input fields, my labels. I might want to change something for that purpose. And so this is where I'm going to go ahead and delete this up here real quick. You really have to have a container that groups the 3 fields together. I mean, you can simply use a div tag, you can use a section, or probably an article tag here. So, let's just use the article tag, because they're all the same to me. They're just a different name. And the key is you give it a name. I'm going to say ID equals, and address info. And I'm going to take the closing article tag here, and I'm going to put it after the zip. So I'm grouping this together. The key is to group. So now I have the new ID here. So let's just add this up here. Now again, let's just put in display flex. Okay, I'm going to refresh. As you can see here, it puts in the city, state, and zip. And of course there's some issues with lining, but we get an idea how it works. Okay, so again, we're putting things side by side for that purpose, and we're putting it with the container. So maybe we don't want it, look all the space between the city here, and you see it's on the right hand side with state. So how do I move that across? Well, this is the label tag where state is. This is the input tag. Okay, so one of the things that we can do is we can go back into the input tag. Let's just say we want margin on the right side. Again, I don't know what it's going to be. I'm going to do 10 pixels at this time, but let's just test this out. And I'm going to refresh. So see that the state is not so close together. Now you're going to say, well, all the space that's here, maybe you want it closer together because you don't want it, because you're going horizontally across. Well, as you remember, what we've done is, for each of the input tags, the labels, we controlled the width. So what can I do for this information that we have in here? Well, you can apply the labels, but you might want to apply something specific to the labels that are in the address info. If you think about that, then that should be a descendant selector. So Descendant Selector says, look at my group, address info, and find me all the labels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to be display block, or inline, I should say display inline block, and I'm reducing the width to 50 pixels. Okay, what does that look like? So I refresh the page, you can see that there's not that empty space, and now we have city, state, zip going across. Now this doesn't affect, you got to be careful with with resizing and so forth, and that's more styling, it's more padding, it's more margins. What I'm trying to do is give you just some basic ideas of what you can start with. Now again, you might not like it this way, okay? So one of the things you might want to do is maybe, the way the address is, pretty much the address could be a larger field, right? So you might want to increase the size of the input tag, the width. Well, how's that done? Well, very easily, and the key here is I would probably go back and use IDs for my input tags. So like for address, I'm just going to add an ID here to identify this, and again, you can give it the same name. Your ID is the same as the name attribute as well. So I'll just name it ID address. Remember, IDs can only be used once throughout the page. Okay, and so now I'm just going to do hashtag address in my style sheet, and I'm just going to simply say width. Let's do 300 pixel. Okay, I'm going to refresh my page, and then the width of that address becomes 300 pixels. Now maybe you want the name to be the same. Well, then maybe that is where you don't use an ID, because IDs only can be used once, and we don't need to apply the same, two styles are going to be the same, so we'll name it class instead, and maybe we change the name here, input width. And then what I'm going to do is up here in the input tag for my name, and actually it's just easier to copy and paste this in. Oops. And then up here, I'm just going to change this real quick. I'll just say dot input width. And now when I go back in and I refresh, you can see that they're both fields are being changed. So that's where classes come into play. But again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to work with this. What we're trying to do here doesn't relate to being responsive yet. So if you're trying to make something web responsive, then you have to add more styling to it, because as you can see here, it doesn't respond to making it smaller. Now I can turn on the flex wrap for city, state, and zip. That would work there. But the key here is that I'm trying to give you some basic starting points with this. Now just FYI, you can apply styles to your input tags. So can I go in and can I change the background color? Now let me use. So will that change the background color for those input tags? Well, let's take a look. It does. So that comes with the green. Can you change the height? Yeah. Can I change the font? Yeah. Can I change font size? Yeah. So you can apply styling to those input tags just like you do with regular text for that purpose. So again, you definitely want to use color schemes that fit your theme of the website. But again, it's something that you want to look at, and I'm trying to give you some ideas with this. So other than that, as we take a look at this, what I'm trying to control is, okay, how do I line it up, get it perfectly? How do I get it side by side? Okay, that's the whole thing about this, and I'm introducing a couple things that allow you to do just that. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be perfect yet. You're going to have to still work on formatting. So just think of this as a basic tutorial to get you started. And now we got to start adding to it.